Part 6. The Confrontation. The island felt different now. After what happened to Simon, everything seemed darker and more dangerous. I could see it in the eyes of the boys. They were scared, but some of them didn't want to admit it. They followed Jack more closely now, as if his strength could protect them. But I knew the truth. The island was changing us, making us forget who we were. Piggy and I kept trying to keep the fire going. We knew it was our only hope. The fire was our signal to the outside world, the one thing that could bring a ship to rescue us. But fewer boys were helping. They were more interested in following Jack, hunting, and playing his games. One morning, I noticed something was wrong. Piggy's glasses were gone. Without them, we couldn't start the fire. I knew who had taken them, Jack and his hunters. They didn't care about the fire. They just wanted the power that came with controlling the one thing we needed most. I decided we had to get the glasses back. I told Piggy and the few boys who still followed me, "We're going to see Jack. We need to talk to him. We can't let them take everything from us." I was nervous, but I tried to stay positive. We had to stay strong, even if the situation was getting worse. We walked to Jack's camp at Castle Rock. The boys there looked different now. They were painted like warriors, and they carried sharp sticks. When we arrived, I called out to Jack, "We need to talk. We need to work together. Give Piggy his glasses back so we can keep the fire going." But Jack didn't want to listen. He laughed and told us to leave. The other boys laughed too. I tried to stay calm, but I could feel my frustration rising. I said, "This isn't the game, Jack. We need the fire to survive." The situation quickly got out of control. Jack ordered his hunters to tie up Sam and Eric, the twins who had come with us. I was shocked. This wasn't just a disagreement anymore. It was a real fight for control. Piggy, who was always the voice of reason, tried to speak up. He held the conch, the shell that had always been a symbol of order. He said, "Listen to me. We have to stay together. We have to keep the fire going." But then, something terrible happened. Roger, one of Jack's followers, pushed a huge rock from above. It rolled down and hit Piggy. He fell, and the conch shattered into pieces. Piggy was gone from the group, just like Simon, and with him, the last bit of order on the island disappeared. I was in shock. I couldn't believe what had just happened. Jack's group cheered, but I felt only emptiness. The fire was out, Piggy wasn't with us anymore, and I was alone. I knew that from now on, things would only get worse. But even then, I tried to hold on to hope. I knew I had to survive. I had to find a way off this island. I couldn't let everything fall apart, not completely. I had to keep going, no matter what. Part 7. The Hunt for Ralph. The island felt like a different place now. Everything had changed. Piggy was gone, and with him, the last bit of order had vanished. I was alone, and I knew that Jack and his hunters were coming for me. They weren't playing games anymore. This was real. I ran through the jungle, my heart pounding. The trees and vines seemed to close in around me, making it hard to move quickly. I could hear the hunters behind me, their voices getting closer. They were shouting, excited by the chase. I knew I had to keep moving, keep hiding, or they would find me. As I ran, I thought about the boys I used to know. The boys who laughed and played, who built shelters and worked together. But now, they were different. The island had changed them, and now they were hunting me like I was an animal. I couldn't believe this was happening, but I knew I had to stay strong. I found a thick bush and crawled under it, trying to catch my breath. The hunters passed by, but I knew they would come back. I needed a plan. I needed to find a way to stay ahead of them. I remembered the shelters we built near the beach, and I thought maybe I could find safety there. But the beach was far away, and the hunters were close. The jungle was hot and thick with the smell of earth and plants. I could hear the sound of the sea in the distance, but it felt like it was a world away. My clothes were torn, and my feet were sore from running on the rough ground, but I couldn't stop. I knew I had to keep going. I crept through the jungle, trying to stay as quiet as possible. I could hear the hunters crashing through the trees, laughing and shouting. They were enjoying this, enjoying the power they felt as they hunted me. It made me sick to think about it, but I couldn't let fear take over. I had to stay focused. As I moved, I saw smoke rising in the distance. My heart sank. They had set the jungle on fire to flush me out. The flames were spreading fast, and the smoke was thick in the air. I could feel the heat even from where I was. The fire was moving towards me, and I knew I couldn't stay hidden for long. I started running again, my lungs burning from the smoke and the effort. The fire was closing in, and I had to find a way out. I stumbled through the undergrowth, my mind racing. I thought about the beach, about the open space where I might have a chance to escape. But the flames were getting closer, and I could hear the crackling of burning wood all around me. Then suddenly I burst out of the jungle and onto the beach. The sight of the open sea was both a relief and a terror. There was nowhere left to run. I was trapped between the fire and the sea. I turned around, expecting to see the hunters right behind me, but instead, I saw something that made me stop in my tracks. A figure stood on the beach, dressed in a uniform. It was an adult, a naval officer. He was looking at me with surprise, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Behind him, a ship was anchored off the coast. Rescue had come, just when I thought all hope was lost. Part 8. The Final Confrontation. When I saw the naval officer standing on the beach, it felt like time had stopped. For a moment, I couldn't move or speak. I was covered in dirt and sweat, and my mind was racing. The officer looked at me with surprise, and I realized how strange I must have looked to him, like a wild creature, not the boy I used to be. Then, the hunters burst out of the jungle, still shouting and chasing. But as soon as they saw the officer, they froze. The fire they had set was still roaring behind them, sending smoke into the sky, but their fierce energy faded. Jack was at the front, holding his spear, his face painted in strange colors. He looked at the officer, and I could see the confusion and fear in his eyes. The officer frowned, taking in the scene, the burning jungle, the boys with their makeshift weapons, the dirt and wildness of it all. He didn't know what we had been through, how everything had fallen apart. He asked, "What are you boys doing?" I couldn't find the words to answer. My throat was dry, and my thoughts were tangled. I looked at Jack, hoping he might speak, but he stayed silent. The other boys began to lower their spears, their faces showing the same mix of emotions. The officer kept looking at us, waiting for an explanation that none of us could give. Finally, I managed to speak. My voice was shaky, but I said, "We were stranded here. We tried to stay together, but, things got out of hand." The officer nodded slowly, as if he understood a little, but I knew he couldn't really grasp what had happened on the island. He looked over at the burning jungle, then back at us. "You boys need to come with me," he said. "The ship will take you back home." The word felt strange, almost foreign. I couldn't remember the last time I had thought about home, about the world beyond the island. The officer's words brought back memories of school, of family, of everything we had left behind. But it also made me realize how much we had changed. We weren't the same boys who had landed on this island. The island had taken something from us, something we could never get back. The other boys started to gather around the officer, dropping their spears in the sand. The fire behind them still raged, but they didn't seem to care about it anymore. Jack walked over too, his head down, no longer the fierce leader he had been. The paint on his face looked like a mask that had cracked, revealing the boy underneath. As we followed the officer to the boat, I glanced back at the island one last time. The jungle was burning, the smoke rising high into the sky. It was like the island was erasing all the traces of what had happened there, like it was closing the chapter on everything we had been through. But I knew the memories would stay with us, no matter how far we went. We climbed onto the ship, and the officer gave us blankets and food. The crew looked at us with curiosity, but they didn't ask many questions. They could see we were tired, and they probably guessed that we had been through something terrible. I sat down, feeling the gentle rocking of the ship beneath me. For the first time in a long while, I felt safe. But as the ship sailed away from the island, I couldn't help but feel a deep sadness. We had survived, but we had lost so much along the way. I looked at the other boys. Some of them were crying, some were silent, but all of us were different now. The island had changed us, and I wasn't sure if we would ever be the same again. Part 9. Reflections. As the ship sailed away from the island, a feeling of relief washed over me. The sea was calm, and the gentle rocking of the boat was soothing. For the first time in a long while, I felt safe. We were going home, and that thought made me both happy and sad. The other boys were quiet. Some sat alone, lost in their thoughts, while others talked in low voices. It was clear that everyone was thinking about what had happened on the island. The things we had done, the choices we had made, and the people we had lost. We were all trying to make sense of it. Jack sat at the far end of the deck, staring out at the sea. He didn't look like the strong leader he had been on the island. He looked tired and worn out, like the rest of us. I could see that he was struggling with his own thoughts, trying to come to terms with everything that had happened. Biggie and Simon were no longer with us, and their absence was a heavy weight on our hearts. We talked about them sometimes, but it was hard to find the right words. They had been good friends, and their loss was something we couldn't fully grasp. The island had taken them from us in ways that we would never forget. The officer and the crew tried to make us comfortable. They gave us blankets and food, and they listened when we talked. But they couldn't really understand what we had been through. How could they? They hadn't seen the island, the fire, the way we had changed. They only saw a group of boys who had been lost. As we sailed, I looked back at the island one last time. It was a small dot on the horizon, disappearing as we moved further away. I thought about the jungle, the beaches, and the fire. The island had been beautiful, but it had also been a place of fear and danger. It had changed us in ways we couldn't undo. We had all lost something on the island, our innocence, our sense of safety, our trust in each other. It wasn't just the physical things that were gone. It was something deeper. The island had shown us a side of ourselves that we hadn't known existed. It had tested us, and in the end, it had taken a toll on our spirits. As we approached the shore, I felt a mix of emotions. I was glad to be going home, but I knew that the journey back to normalcy wouldn't be easy. We would have to face our families, our friends, and a world that felt far away from the island we had just left. We would have to explain what happened, even though we could barely understand it ourselves. The ship docked, and we stepped onto the land. The familiar sights and sounds of home were comforting, but they also felt strange. It was like stepping into a world that had continued on without us, while we had been trapped in our own isolated reality. The officer helped us with our bags, and we were taken to a place where we could rest and recover. There were doctors and people who wanted to help us, but it felt overwhelming. We were still processing everything, still trying to make sense of the island and our place in the world. As I lay down to rest, I thought about the future. We had survived, but we had also been deeply changed. The island had taken something from us, and it was something we would carry with us forever. We had to find a way to move forward, to heal, and to remember the lessons we had learned. But for now, I was grateful to be safe. I was grateful to be home, and I hoped that, in time, we would find a way to make peace with what had happened. The island had been a harsh teacher, but we had survived its lessons. We had made it through, and that was something to hold on to as we faced the days ahead. Part 10. New Beginnings. The days after we returned were a blur. The world outside felt strange, like it was moving too fast. We were back in a place with rules and routines, but everything seemed different. We had been away for so long that normal life felt almost unreal. We were taken to a safe place where we could rest and get medical care. The people there were kind, but they didn't fully understand what we had been through. We tried to explain, but the words felt inadequate. How could we convey the depth of our experiences, the fear, the struggle, and the loss? The adults around us were concerned and curious. They asked questions about what happened on the island, but we often didn't have the answers. Some things were too painful to talk about, and other things were too complex to explain. It was easier to stay quiet and think about our own memories. As we began to adjust to life back home, we were surrounded by family and friends who were relieved to see us. They hugged us and welcomed us back, but their joy was mixed with confusion. They didn't know what we had been through, and we didn't always know how to share it. Jack and I, along with the other boys, were put in separate rooms to get some rest and time to ourselves. We were given counseling to help us deal with the trauma, and though it was helpful, it was hard to talk about the island. The memories were vivid, and they seemed too intense to share in a simple conversation. The island had changed us, and we struggled to fit back into our old lives. Everything felt different. The way people talked, the way they looked at us, even the way we looked at ourselves. We were trying to find a place where we belonged, but it was difficult. Jack seemed to withdraw even more than the rest of us. He didn't talk much, and when he did, his words were often sharp and distant. He was dealing with his own feelings, his own regrets. It was clear that the island had left a mark on him too. I found solace in small things. The familiar sound of birds, the feeling of rain on my face, and the comfort of a warm bed. They were reminders of the world I had almost forgotten. But even these simple comforts couldn't erase the memories of the island. One day, as we sat together, we started to talk about what had happened. It wasn't easy, but it helped a little. We shared stories about the island, about Piggy and Simon, and about how we had tried to survive. We laughed at some memories and cried at others. It was a way to process everything, to start healing. Life moved forward, and we gradually began to adapt. We returned to school, reconnected with old friends, and tried to find a sense of normalcy. It was a long and difficult process, but we were determined to move forward. The island had taught us many things about ourselves, about each other, and about the nature of fear and power. It had been a harsh lesson, one that we would carry with us forever. But we hoped that, with time, we could use those lessons to build a better future for ourselves. As we continued with our lives, we knew that the island would always be a part of us. It had shaped who we were, and its memories would never fade completely. But we also knew that we had survived, and that survival was something to hold on to. We had faced unimaginable challenges and had come through them. In the end, we were grateful for the chance to start anew. We knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but we were ready to face it. The island had been a part of our journey, but it didn't define who we were. We would move forward, carrying its lessons with us, and build a future where we could find peace and hope.